People doing extraordinary things to help others.
If he didn't do what he did, we would have died.
Heroic acts that have sometimes meant the difference between life and death.
And he was just crying, "Don't let me die, don't let me die, save me, save me."
Amazing acts of courage.
It was just a natural reaction. This guy needs help.
Captured on dash cams, CCTV, and mobile phones. Incredible stories from the UK.
He put his life at risk just to save me.
And across the world.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
All the people that assisted with my rescues that day are my heroes.
We genuinely owe our lives to him.
Today on Saved on Camera. In Hawaii, a rising star in the world of volleyball takes a step too far on a hike to a waterfall.
I just noticed she was getting a little too close to the edge.
I couldn't see very well, and my right foot came out from under me.
And she will have to fight to prove doctors wrong and keep her career.
Everything that I'd worked so hard for was just gone like that in an instant.
In the UK, a home invasion sees a husband fight off 3 masked men to protect his wife.
You sort of see this sort of stuff on TV. You don't expect 3 armed men in your home.
A paraglider pilot has crashed into a cliff on the Dorset coast. He's left hanging on for his life with a 500-foot drop below him.
My friend has crashed his paraglider into a cliff.
The rescue services are on their way, but they have only one clue to his location.
The caller mentioned that the paraglider was stuck about 20 meters below a tree.
And in the crystal clear waters of the Bahamas, a free diver makes a near fatal error.
We weren't really careful of the depth. I just used up too much fighting the fish as I was down there.
Leaving his brother to try and save him from drowning.
Just one thing on my mind, go save him.
In Hawaii, a woman slips and falls down a 50-foot waterfall. Friends who witness the fall fear for the worst.
I have to be prepared for any circumstance that I might encounter. She could be alive, she could be dead.
Heather Friesen, a professional volleyball player, was based in California when an exciting opportunity came her way.
I got a scholarship to play at the University of Hawaii. I'd never been to Hawaii before, and I was really excited to go.
And it was there she met her adventurous friend, Austin Ackery.
We just hit it off right from the get-go. We started sharing each other's stories and developing a really strong and deep connection.
He was just such a happy, cheerful person that we instantly became friends, and he loved hiking, so we would go on hikes together.
When Austin suggested a group of them hike the Cow Crater Trail in Honolulu, Heather jumped at the chance.
It was one that I'd never gone on before, so I was really excited, and he said that a couple other friends were coming.
The Cow Crater hike is up to the ridge of the Ko'olau Mountains. We couldn't pray for a better day. There's blue skies, minimal clouds overhead.
When we got to the beginning of the hike, there was a sign that said something like, Cow Crater Trail, hike at your own risk. But we all just kind of laughed at it and said, no, we'll be fine. We're just going to keep going. I also remember saying, man, my season starts in a week. I better not roll my ankle or something because my coach would be really mad at me.
The group continued climbing, keen to reach the top of the waterfall as fast as possible.
The climb to the top of the waterfall wasn't all that difficult. It was fairly short, probably took no more than 5 to 10 minutes.
Having climbed, the pair admired the scenery, but Heather's enjoyment was about to be cut short.
Whoa. I really just wanted to take a look over the edge of the waterfall because in my mind I thought, how many times do you get to look over the edge of a 50-foot waterfall?
I just noticed she was getting a little too close to the edge.
There's this little trickle of water that was kind of in the shadows that I couldn't see very well. And so my right foot unfortunately just happened to step right on that. Whoa. And it came out from under me. I remember looking and seeing this little ridge that I could put my left hand on.
I yelled out, "Heather, hold on."
I tried to grab onto that ridge, but that was too slippery as well.
I remember seeing her tumble down, and it was not a pretty sight.
I kind of curled up into a ball. I needed to land on my left side because I'm right-handed, so that's my hitting arm. So all of those thoughts were going through my head as I was in the free fall. I hit the rocks and then I kind of fell into the water from there.
But the pool of water wasn't deep enough to break her fall.
The water at the bottom of the waterfall was only about knee height.
Austin raced down to the bottom.
I have to be prepared for any circumstance that I might encounter when I find her at the bottom of that waterfall. She could be alive, she could be dead.
But he wasn't prepared for what he found.
She was standing up, and I thought that was so bizarre. How could somebody that takes that kind of fall, how could they be standing up?
I just used what energy I had to stand up and walk over to the side of the waterfall.
Even though Heather was moving around, Austin knew she could still be in danger.
That's when other members of our group came down. I just told them, keep her awake. We do not want her falling asleep. We do not want her going unconscious. We want her awake and communicating with us. Do whatever you need to do to keep her conscious.
Stay there, don't move.
After calling for local emergency services, a helicopter was dispatched.
They kept telling me to just take deep breaths and that the helicopter was going to be there quickly.
Due to the remote location, the Honolulu ground paramedic team was also dispatched. With them, Don Takara.
She couldn't walk. She couldn't walk out of that area, so they needed to airlift her out.
By this stage, Heather's adrenaline had subsided and pain had taken over.
I need somebody down here to help me out.
My whole left side felt like it was immobilized and like I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe very well. It felt like my left lung was sort of like wet, crumpled up tissue paper. When I first heard that helicopter, I was so relieved. I just knew that I was gonna get to the hospital soon and that they were gonna start fixing me.
But the helicopter couldn't land there. Instead, a cage was sent down to airlift Heather to waiting ground paramedics.
Fly her up to our location, which is a mile or two away from their location.
As soon as I got through the trees, that was the most peaceful moment that I've ever had in my life. Which sounds crazy because it was amidst all this chaos, but I just felt so calm and I kept repeating to myself, God's got me, I know I'm going to be okay.
The paramedics were also surprised at how okay Heather seemed, but they must now consider internal injuries.
We've noticed there was crepitus in her chest, indicating that she had a punctured lung, basically.
Riding over those roads is when I really started to realize what kind of pain I was in.
Because her fall was so high, it was critical that we got her to the trauma center as soon as possible.
Finally, in hospital, the true extent of Heather's injuries were revealed.
They told me that I had 10 broken ribs, a collapsed lung, and a fractured scapula, which is my shoulder blade. And I had a couple really deep wounds that they had to stitch up.
With Austin now by her bedside, there was more devastating news to come.
The doctors told us the extent of her injuries, and from what he could tell, Heather would not be playing volleyball ever again.
I remember being so devastated, crying really hard because, man, everything that I'd worked so hard for was just gone like that in an instant.
But Heather was to defy the doctor's predictions.
It was the beginning of a very, very slow recovery process, but now I'm back to full strength and competing at the professional level, so it's just amazing.
In the UK, a paraglider has crashed into a cliff with a sheer drop of 500 feet below.
Control rescue.
He's been up there for nearly 2 hours and exhaustion is setting in. Help is on the way, but they are worried they will not reach him in time.
I look at the information on my phone and it said crashed paraglider, stuck on the side of the cliff, Thorncombe Beacon. Basically, the 3 pieces of information you really didn't want to see.
"28-year-old Joe Redmond is a self-confessed adrenaline junkie.
My old hobbies were kite surfing and a couple of other things, but I decided, right, I'm going to go and find something. It's either paragliding or base jumping.
And having trained at a paraglider school, he got his wings and he was up and away.
Normal flying was a little bit slow for me, so I kind of like started to play around with the wing, and I really found out about paragliding. It's kind of like it's like a boy racer of paragliding.
But it was his love of flying close to the wind which was to put him in grave danger when he decided to travel down for a day's paragliding with his friend Seb to the spectacular cliffs of Eat Beach in the UK.
The weather was really good, blue skies and blue sea. Good travel distance east and west down the coast with plenty of height and beautiful views.
With high expectations for a fun-filled day, Joe was raring to go.
Mentally, I was prepared for the flight. It was very simple. I wasn't doing anything new. I had just gone over places and been places I've been before. So getting my equipment out, I just made sure everything was the same. It was good to go. It was in working condition. Taking off and landing is the most dangerous part. Crashing normally equals hitting the ground badly. So yeah, taking off, you have to be pretty careful. You've got like people surrounding you with their wings laid out, ready to run off the edge of the cliff, and the wind will give you enough energy to help you pull the glider up, guide it into an overhead position where you turn and face out to sea. Make sure you're in a good posture and you leave the hill and you're airborne. So my friend Seb had taken off before me, and he'd already managed to do a small circuit out to the left of takeoff. So when I took off, he was behind my right shoulder, and as we came out together, I looked to my right, and I can see Seb, you know, maybe 15, 20 feet up and to my right.
I know, come in!
We normally talk to each other in the sky, so we're flying up and down, talking and discussing, and kind of not showing off, but you're kind of enjoying your company.
After an exhilarating morning in the air, Seb and Joe decided that it was time to come back to terra firma and grab some lunch.
So me and Seb had both decided over lunch that it might be a good idea to try and race back to takeoff where we had initially started. Seb has a faster wing than me, so he had the advantage, gave me the privilege of taking off first.
How far forward is it?
But quite quickly, Seb overtook Joe in the race, and this changed the dynamics drastically, putting Joe on a flight path to disaster.
As soon as I'd realized that Seb had overtook me and I needed to make some distance, I tried to cut a few corners out of the terrain. Unfortunately, when I was flying past Thorncombe, trying to catch up with Seb, one of my instruments had fallen down beneath my seat. So in my effort to retrieve the instrument, I had gone down to pick it up, and this had led me to swing into the cliff. And when I looked up and I realized what was about to happen, I leaned away. It was too late. I was going to hit the cliff. When I hit the cliff, the first thing that hit the cliff was my left side. My elbow swung in, my hip swung in, and my wing had then scooped onto the cliff edge, essentially grabbing the cliff and keeping me safe. I was now just hanging onto the rock, which is a lot better than a situation where you're half falling, half flying, you know, and I was lucky to be conscious the whole time as well. Just needed a moment to get over the pain, and then a moment to just go, well, where am I? Like, what is going on? So I started to look at how high I was. Where were people? Did they see me? I looked at the ground. I was like, okay, so I'm 25 meters up. I looked at the top. I was like, okay, so I'm like 15, 20 meters from the top. Am I gonna try and climb down? Am I gonna try and climb up? Am I gonna just sit here and play safe? Is the paraglider about to slip and I'm gonna fall anyway? It's very loose rock, not good to climb on.
As he looked up, he spotted something that might help.
I could see a ledge above my head that gave me more of a platform to stand on. It was a place where I could reevaluate with more time. There was a part of me that kind of felt more secure climbing than I did trusting the paraglider to hold my weight up. So I had climbed 2 meters from where I got stuck in my seat, and I'd found this ledge. It must have been maybe 2 square feet wide. It was a small ledge, just enough for your 2 feet.
Later, are Joe's rescuers a little too close for comfort?
I couldn't see it. It managed to come around the corner, and I was very aware that if it literally had flown over me, because of how delicately balanced I was, it was going to blow me off.
A young couple faced their worst nightmare as masked men enter their home.
By the time I'd got to the top of the stairs and looked down, I saw men in balaclavas at the back door of my property.
With his wife ill upstairs and heavily outnumbered, a husband decides to fight back to protect her, no matter the cost.
One of them pulled out which appeared to look like a knife to me, and then came towards me and said he's going to kill me.
Loved-up couple Charlotte and Asif Ali live with their dogs in Rochdale near Manchester, in the UK.
Me and Asif have been together for 11 years, married 8 years this year. It's an amazing thing to find a man that treats you as his queen. It might sound a little bit cheesy, but when you find a person who just adores you as you are, you know, you can't ask for anything more, really.
Asif works as an entrepreneur in the local community.
I own a few small businesses within the town. I'm in clothing and also an estate agent.
And following a successful day at work, Asif headed home as usual.
We had dinner together. Charlotte said she wasn't feeling too well. I had a call booked with one of my clients.
We are normally together for most of the evening until we go upstairs to bed. It was unusual that I wasn't with Asif downstairs in the property that night. So I went upstairs and thought I'll put some TV on first and just relax, and then I must have just drifted off.
While Charlotte rested upstairs, Asif began his video call to his clients, Carla and Jamie Showett.
Hi Asif, how are you doing?
Nice to virtually meet you at last.
We were on the call for about an hour, both of us with Asif. He was sat in his kitchen and he had the dogs in the background.
9:15 in the evening, the dog started barking. We had the patio doors open so the dogs could just freely come in and out of the patio.
But soon the dog's barking was to turn from playful to panicked.
When the dogs hear a noise outside, they'd run out and bark, but this bark was totally different. They'd run out, barked, and then sprinted back into the house, and then aggressively barking like I've never heard anything like it.
And suddenly, mid-sentence, Asif just pushed his chair backwards, stood up with a kind of puzzled expression for a split second, and then launched himself over the table.
Asif?
And nothing could prepare Asif for what he was about to face.
I expected it to be foxes, but, you know, I walked around the corner and someone stood there head to toe in black.
Charlotte also quickly became aware of the strange noises downstairs.
Woke up to the dogs barking. Got up out of bed, and by the time I'd got to the top of the stairs and looked down, I saw men in balaclavas at the back door of my property.
With no time to consider a plan of action, Asif launched himself towards the intruders.
My first instinct was to protect my wife, so I just went in towards him. He threw a punch, which I ducked my head, and then I just literally laid into him.
With the video call still connected, Carla and Jamie could only listen in shock as the drama unfolded.
Okay, Asif. Hello?
We couldn't really see a lot, but we could hear everything. Well, it started off with, what are you doing? Why are you here? What's going on? And then it was just confusion, everyone shouting at the same time.
Very confusing for us. We just stood there staring at the screen, just saying to ourselves, oh my God, oh my God.
And the situation was about to turn even more dangerous for Asif.
Pinned this one man against the wall, and with the corner of my eye, I seen another one walk in. So, still holding the first man, I sort of flew into the second one. At this point, I turned, shouted up, Charlotte, phone the police and barricade yourself in.
I went into the back bedroom, I closed the door behind me and phoned 999.
Meanwhile, downstairs, things were going from bad to worse as he was becoming heavily outnumbered by the intruders.
I had the one pinned, and then the second one, I managed to grab him as well, and that's when I seen the third one come through the door. It was just surreal, you know. You sort of see this sort of stuff on a film, you know, on the TV. You don't expect to be facing, you know, 3 armed men in your home. So I sort of let go of the 1 and 2 and threw punches at the third one.
For Carla and Jamie, it was like a real-life horror film, and they felt helpless.
What do you want to do? Do you know where they live? Where they live?
Hold on, let me just check quickly.
You could tell that there was actually a physical fight. Yeah, there was sounds of scuffle, footsteps banging.
Felt like we were powerless to help them.
Charlotte had managed to call the police, but all they could do was wait in terror as the fighting continued.
I told him the address and said, there's 3 men with balaclavas that had just entered my home. All that was going through my mind was that something was going to happen to Asif, and, you know, that itself is enough to, you know, terrify you.
And we didn't know what happened to Asif, whether he was still alive.
Later, with Asif heavily outnumbered by the attackers, things take a more dangerous turn.
One of them pulled out which appeared to look like a knife to me, and then came towards me and said he's going to kill me.
While trying to bag a prize fish, a spear diver in the Caribbean started to get into trouble.
I was making my way up back to the surface, and that's when, you know, everything went wrong.
His brother, also in the water, knew he had to do everything he possibly could to save his life.
He's gonna drown if I don't get him. Just go and save him. I'm just like, Danny, breathe, Danny, breathe.
Breathe, Danny! Breathe, Danny!
Millions of tourists opt for the glorious surroundings of the Bahamas every single year. And it's where Alex Mullings and his brother Danny spent most of their childhood. It's also where they developed their love of the sea.
I love the water since I was a kid. I have been doing fishing since I was 14 years old.
Me and Alex started diving about the same time, you know. He had a few months on me, And that was pretty significant because, I was a rookie just starting out, and he was able to guide me along and help me out and help me to get better.
The brothers share a close bond and a healthy sense of competition.
Donnie and I would do just about everything together.
We'd always try to see who's the best. Anything he did, I try to be better than him.
After getting to grips with fishing, they were both in search of their next pursuit.
We just got tired of fishing and we wanted to try something a little bit more challenging. I fell in love with spearfishing.
Spearfishing is where you just hold your breath, you have a snorkel and you have a mask, and you survey the underwater and you look for your next meal. You look for a fish.
Free diving means the brothers can only stay below the surface for a limited amount of time before they need to rise for more air.
Generally, my dives are anywhere from a minute to a minute and 30 seconds, or even sometimes 2 minutes.
The brothers were separated when Danny went off to study in the States. Their new pursuit would have to wait until the Christmas break.
I had just gotten back from university and we were pretty eager to go out and, do some spearfishing.
And Alex was keen to plan a trip that they'd never done before. It would turn out to be a trip that they would never forget.
The night before, I've been looking at spots that we maybe didn't dive on that looked good.
As soon as the first light was up, we drove to the pier where we have our boat docked up.
It was my dad, my sister, and my brother.
The party headed out to a location neither had been to before, and it wasn't long before they saw a prize.
When we drove over this spot, and we saw like a grouper, and we were like, okay, well, let's see if we can get that grouper.
Both knew they had to prepare, but neither knew how deep they were about to dive.
We weren't really careful of the depth. Before any dive, you want to take in as much air as possible before you go down.
You have to be very conscious of the speed that you're doing and the energy that you're burning in chasing this fish. We jumped in and we started our hunt.
Danny was determined to bag this group of fish and went back down alone.
Danny went down, he dove on one hole and then he swam around to the other hole and he checked it.
It was pretty deep, I want to say about 70 feet. And I went down all the way to the bottom. I stayed down for quite a bit.
What must have been going through his mind was, okay, I don't see the fish, so let me head back up. Then I see him stop and he starts to deviate.
Danny may have lost sight of the grouper, but caught sight of a bigger prize.
As I was gonna come back up, I saw this nice hogfish, and I just had to shoot it.
I see the hogfish that he's stalking, and then he lines his shot up with his pole spear, and he shoots the hogfish.
Danny had got his prize fish, but at what cost?
I just used up too much fighting the fish as I was down there and trying to swim back up.
He starts to come back up with the hogfish.
And I was making my way up back to the surface, and that's when, everything went wrong.
When he got midway, he started to lose control.
It was just the lack of oxygen in the body.
I'm thinking, oh, well, what is he doing? You see bubbles, he loses motor control, and he begins to sink.
As soon as I hit the surface, that's the last thing I remember.
Later, Alex faces a desperate battle to save his brother from drowning.
My mind was just dive, get him, come back up.
Back in the UK, a paraglider pilot has flown into a cliff. He is 500 feet up with a sheer drop below. But he has found a small ledge and is hanging on for dear life.
So I had climbed 2 meters from where I got stuck. It was a small ledge, just enough for your 2 feet.
Having secured himself, all Joe could do was wait for help. And luckily, his friend Seb had made a call.
Catch your rescue.
Hello, My friend has crashed his paraglider into a cliff at Thorncombe Beacon. He is stuck on literally the side of the cliff, probably about 20 metres from the top. There's a tree at the top, 60 metres from the bottom. So he's looking at a very nasty fall, and he doesn't have a very big leg.
Okay, that's great, mate. All right, cheers, but we do have assistance coming.
The call came through to Jake Lanning, the Deputy Station Officer for West Bay Coast Guard.
Just after 6 o'clock, the pages went off. I had a look at the information on my phone, and it said crashed paraglider, stuck on the side of the cliff, Thorncombe Beacon. Basically, the 3 pieces of information you really didn't want to see. The Coast Guard tasked 2 teams to respond. That was West Bay team and the Lyme Regis team, and they'd also tasked a Coast Guard rescue helicopter. There are no roads up to Thorncombe Beacon, so we travelled as far as we could on the main roads and then drove off-road the rest of the way.
But when they arrived, they couldn't see anything and didn't know where to look. Luckily, when Seb had phoned, he had mentioned a vital fact.
In the 999 call, the caller mentioned that the paraglider was stuck about 20 metres below a tree. There are no other trees up there apart from this one right near the edge of the cliff. So we set up our rescue equipment above that tree.
The Coast Guard helicopter had also arrived. Not a welcome sight for Joe, who had been hanging onto the cliff ledge for 2 hours and was starting to feel exhausted.
I heard it, I couldn't see it, it managed to come around the corner, and I was very aware that if it literally had flown over me, because of how delicately balanced I was, it was going to blow me off.
Our officer in charge spoke with the helicopter pilot, who had a very clear view of where the casualty was. The decision from the helicopter was that actually this isn't a rescue that they should attempt. If they got too close to the casualty, the downdraft from the helicopter, which is significant, could have quite simply blown them off the cliff. I didn't overhear the conversation between our officer in charge and the helicopter pilot, but I remember vividly one of the other officers tapping me on the shoulder and saying, "Jake, you're going over." I remember looking over the edge of the cliff for the first time and suddenly feeling quite sick. I guess the enormity suddenly hit me of what I was about to do. I could see the paragliding wing stuck on the cliff below me. I couldn't see him, but I headed towards the wing. Arrived at the wing, I couldn't see him. I didn't know exactly where he was, but an officer on the radio kind of gave me a rough idea. I actually lifted the corner of the wing up so I could see further down the cliff, and there he was. He was stuck on a very small ledge with his hands around a rock.
I could start hearing the rescue team like rappelling down to me. I could hear Jake before I saw him, and he actually had climbed over my paraglider and had moved it out the way to say hello.
What surprised me about this casualty was he was very calm. I shouted down to him, "My name's Jake, I'm with the Coast Guard. Don't move, I'm going to come down to your location."
But they were not out of the woods yet, and after hours clinging on, Joe's calmness was cause for concern.
We sometimes see something called rescue collapse, which is where a casualty can relax in those moments before rescue when they think they're about to be saved, and sometimes things can go wrong. We have a piece of equipment called a rescue harness, which is basically a big strap that wraps around your body under your arms and connects them into my system. Had I moved too quickly, there's a possibility that I could have actually pulled him off of the ledge.
There's a moment where I have to let go of the rock I'm holding and essentially hold on to Jake. But yeah, for a split second, my weight shifted off the rock. It's that feeling of, okay, like this is it.
There was quite an uncomfortable moment where I had to move him off of the ledge he'd been standing on so that he was effectively hanging in front of me with his full weight on the ropes. At that point, I was able to fully connect the leg straps which complete the harness, ready for his journey back to the top of the cliff. At the point where we are ready for recovery, the officers who'd been keeping a watchful eye at the top of the cliff fitted a winch recovery system and were able to physically winch us back to the top of the cliff.
When I finally got over the top, I was very happy just to be stood up, back on level ground.
When we reached the top of the cliff, it was pure elation. It wasn't just me involved in this rescue. There was a whole team of people working very hard at the top of that cliff to bring this gentleman to safety.
What was more amazing is that Joe escaped with only minor injuries. He knows that the outcome could have been very different and will be forever grateful to those who saved him.
I'm really thankful for the Coast Guard team that rescued me. It's really important to have these teams help people like me.
In the waters off the Bahamas, a free diver got into serious trouble on a spearfishing trip with his brother.
I was making my way up back to the surface, and that's when, everything went wrong.
Having lost consciousness, his brother rushed to save him from drowning.
Just one thing on my mind, that was, go save him. I'm his dive partner. He's gonna lose consciousness, he's gonna sink, and he's gonna drown if I don't get him. Just go and save him. I dove down for him, and my mind was blank. My mind was just dive, get him, come back up.
Alex, he immediately pulled me back up to the surface.
And once I got him up, then I started to try to get him to react. So I took off his mask on his face, and I started to talk to him, breathe, breathe.
Breathe, Danny! Breathe, Danny! Danny, breathe! Danny, breathe!
I'm just like, Danny, breathe, Danny, breathe. Eventually, he takes a breath.
The last few times he maybe shouted to breathe, I kind of subconsciously heard it. And I think that's what kind of triggered me to start breathing again.
Breathe, breathe, what? Breathe, 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 okay. Breathe.
Once Danny regained consciousness, a lot of feelings hit me. Adrenaline definitely hit me. I could have just lost my brother. What could have happened if we both, passed out? What if I wasn't able to get him?
But Alex still had a job to do. He needed to get him to safety.
I swam him back to the boat. I took the hogfish from him, and then I passed it to my dad that was on the boat. I tried to compose myself.
My dad and my sister were all shaken up, my brother as well. So, we called it a day after that, and I immediately went to the hospital.
Danny may not have drowned in the sea, but he wasn't out of danger yet.
So we were scared that he could still drown within 24 hours. I was more fearful of the secondary drowning, which is basically your lungs are so filled with water that even though you're breathing, they're still not absorbing enough oxygen.
They did x-rays and stuff like that to see if there were any water or something in the lungs.
Because I was like, okay, I did my job, but now, he's gonna die. That was more fearful to me than the incident occurred.
I got the all clear, but I still stayed in the hospital for a few days just to make sure that everything was good.
The drama of that day seemed to affect Danny the least.
I wasn't really traumatized by the experience. I think it was more my brother and my dad and my sister. Every time I dived, they would always be on the lookout even more after the incident happened.
It took me a while to actually compose myself, not just that day, but it took me quite a few months to actually regain that composure that I once had.
But the event has had an impact on both brothers.
I think things happen for a reason, and that definitely happened for a reason. I think it made us more safe divers, and he definitely learned his threshold that he shouldn't go over.
I'm thankful towards my brother that he was there that day and at the right place at the right time. He got me back to regain my consciousness and help me back up to the surface. I mean, only the worst could happen if he wasn't there and he wasn't paying attention. I probably wouldn't be here today, you know, to tell this story.
Earlier, a husband was single-handedly fighting off intruders to protect his wife. But the situation was looking increasingly dangerous as the burglars weren't about to give up.
Asif?
In their home in London, his business associates could only listen in shock as they heard what was going on via their video call. The police had been called, but until they arrived, Asif was on his own, fighting off the intruders.
I didn't expect me to, turn around and starting to fight with them. I never even thought about for a second of my safety. It was all to do with my wife.
And it looked like his one-man defense was working, as the attackers seemed to be almost out of the house.
First one, he didn't want to know. He was like cowering against the door. And they then retreated to see what they were going to do next.
But they weren't giving up yet, and things were about to turn even more threatening.
At that point, I was trying to shut the patio door closed. One of them held it open on the other side, and then one of them pulled out, which appeared to look like a knife to me, and then came towards me and said he's going to kill me.
He ran back past the screen, and we're like, oh my God, Asif, are you okay? Are you okay? And obviously he didn't, he literally just whoosh, past the screen and then whoosh, back again.
Fearful for his life and adrenaline pumping, Asif ran to the kitchen to find something to protect himself with.
He followed me in. I grabbed 2 kitchen knives and turned around and looked at him.
Luckily for him, this tactic worked.
He then closed the kitchen door and then he then walked out. So at this point, I think they didn't want to know.
But the men weren't about to leave quietly as they attacked again.
2 of them holding big bricks. One of them dropped the brick and then he ran off first. And then the other one who was holding the brick threw it at the patio door. Fortunately for us, we have got protective glass, so it's not come through, but should that have been any normal glass, that would have come through and probably knocked me out.
Upstairs, Charlotte was panicking about what might be happening.
I didn't know what it was, I just heard a massive bang, so at that point I did go downstairs, and what I thought I could do, I honestly don't know, but there was no way I could stay upstairs hearing that sort of noise.
As I've gone outside to see where they've gone, Charlotte had come down the stairs, so she then somehow appeared outside, and I just sort of was pushing her to go back inside to make sure she was safe.
It was a sigh of relief completely that I could see Asif, stood up. He was absolutely fine and unharmed, and I was still on the phone to the police, trying to get the story across and communicate as well at the same time.
But there was a complication, meaning help hadn't reached them yet.
Unfortunately for us, the police went to the wrong address because so many different neighbours had phoned because the screaming and shouting was so much that no one knew where exactly it was coming from.
While they awaited the police, the community rallied round the couple.
The next door neighbours came round to check that we were okay, and then another neighbour visited as well. But it was reassuring that people had come round and they do care.
And there were still 2 other people anxious to know if the couple was safe.
And I could hear the Skype calls, is everything all right, is everything all right? And then I realised the call was still going, so I just sort of said, I'm going to have to come back to you.
Once the call was ended, what happened to them? We didn't know whether the people had left or if Charlotte was okay. Obviously, Asif had been okay enough to come and switch off the call. It was just insane, and we could hardly sleep that night, really.
When the police finally arrived, when we watched the footage back and showed them, they said well done to Asif, for what he did.
But when they could finally take stock of the terrifying ordeal, it hit home for the couple just how lucky they were.
All that kept going through my mind is that it could have ended up in such a different way, and I could have lost my husband over it, but so courageous at the same time that he put his life at risk just to save me.
That I've been in the street and I'm walking down the street and 3 blokes come at me, I'd probably turn around and run. But if they've come into my home, my wife's there was nothing, you know, whether there were going to be 5, 6, 7 of them, there was never going to get past me to hurt my wife.
Belongings can be replaced, people can't. I was upstairs, helpless, and he just wanted to make sure that no matter what happened, nobody came anywhere near me.
Earlier, we saw a paraglider pilot rescued by the Coast Guard team in Dorset, in the UK. A year later, and Jake and the team from the West Bay Coast Guard are about to meet up with the man they saved that day for the first time.
Really good to see you too.
Cool. How long has it been? Like a year now?
It's been a year.
Has it actually been a year?
Let me introduce you to Gemma.
Yeah, Gemma.
Yeah,
Hi.
Gemma operated your main line that day.
Did she?
Alan operated the safety.
Alan. Nice to meet you.
This is Rob, our senior
nice
coastal officer who's responsible for our training. That was the first time that I've rescued someone who was precarious. And I said to the guys earlier, that was the calmest casualty that I ever could have wished for. We've done quite a few cliff rescues before, mainly of dogs, but this is the first time I've been involved with someone in such a precarious and life-threatening position.
You came, you like, hey, can I move this? I was like, yeah, you can move the paraglider. Like, you had to like peek underneath, you remember?
Yeah, I couldn't see you until I lifted that wing. I remember looking through and you were literally both hands around the rock.
Yeah, good to have a guy with a rope come down and get you. Well, thank you very much.
No, our pleasure.
Meeting up with Joe has reinforced to Jake the reason why he volunteers.
I think it's a great privilege to be able to help anyone who is in danger, and it makes you feel incredibly proud.
But the accident hasn't put Joe off flying, and he didn't waste time getting back to the sport he loves.
It's taken perhaps a week or two to get over the crash, but I was back in the air. Next weekend I was flying Eep again. It was like, get back on the horse, you know, be careful, play it safe, keep flying.